All right. Well, we've got a chance to look at the card, and this turnaround, like her model looks absolutely gorgeous. But I'm about ready to see Tiamat in game.
Right.
So, as is tradition for the update show, I will give the reins to Pawn and let him go wild, and then we'll talk about everything.
Oh wow. Okay, that's the leap into melee form. 3 melee attacks. Oh.
Oh my goodness! Absolutely.
And the game froze.
That was so much.
Did Pawn crash the game?
Oh my gosh, there was so much going on. Oh, that was sick. He probably
Those animations look so fluid.
Oh
yeah,
my goodness!
I mean,
And
the color and tone details. I mean, the whole team really did an insane job. I mean, she's got, I think, the most abilities in the game, actually.
Yeah,
and,
I was gonna say, Clumsy, it wouldn't be an update show with you if we didn't have a new reigning supreme god for the most abilities in Smite.
I mean,
so
she's the primordial queen and the mother of monsters, the first of the Babylonian pantheon. We really wanted to do justice on, you know, who Tiamat is with so many different themes. I think the team did a fantastic job.
yeah, and we'll be back in game in just a second, chat, going through setting things up. Just again, Tiamat was just too strong. She's too powerful.
We had that conquest match running for like an hour plus or some 2 hours, so that's why we had to restart. But nothing with Tiamat's kit, although we expect you all to find some stuff on PTS as well.
Yeah.
Clumsy, you could give just kind of a brief overview of the kit if you'd like as a start. The core goals, core themes.
Like we talked about in the closer look blog, which I hope all of you guys got to see, is that Tiamat has a lot of different themes going on, right? She's the mother of monsters. She's this primordial queen, the goddess of the salt sea and primordial creation. And we wanted to really, and she's the first of the Babylonian pantheon, right? We wanted to take all these different themes and come together to create a creature in our game that was really unlike anything that you've seen before. So amongst that, we wanted to make her a stand switcher, which in a way is also very different with how she switches between 2 different archetypes of mages. And you're going to see that come into play with her passive, which we can get into in just a second, I think.
Yeah, so we're gonna do things just a little bit different here. We're not gonna go like in order of like actual abilities. We're gonna start off with the stance switch first, and then talk about everything else. So first up, we've got Grounding Dive, which is her ability 3 in Flying Stance. Talk to me about Grounding Dive, Clumsy.
Yep, so Grounding Dive is a movement ability and a mechanism to go in switching between stances. So Tiamat goes between Flying Stance and Ground Stance. Grounding Dive, all it really does is actually transition to her with a leap, dealing damage when she hits the ground, and bringing her to her ground stance. It also provides Tiamat 1 hardened scale, which is a part of her passive, which I'll get into in just a second. But the opposite of Grounding Dive, which you can now use as the third ability in this stance, is Rising Flights.
Yes.
Suffer thee no more.
So Rising Flight
the
is also
as
pretty
well.
simple. It's a blast of energy that deals damage to energies, and it sends herself backwards, returning her to her flying stance.
That's a ton of ability.
Using Grounding Dive and Rising Flight is the only way to switch between these 2 different stances.
Yeah, super unique. So her stance switch is tied to her ability 3, which is her movement ability. She can either leap in and go to grounded stance, or leap back and go to flying stance. So let's talk about
turn your camera.
Really unique dynamics though with the ability of having to use your movement ability to also change stances, because a lot of times you're using your movement abilities as a very reactive state, and then all of a sudden you've got to fight with like a different kit. It creates a really different feel for this character compared to all the other stance switchers. And also just take a look at how tall she is, towering over that Odin while she's in her flying stance.
I know. I think we talked about it in the closer look. So she's taller than all the other gods, but not quite as tall as Jormungandr or Cthulhu. She's kind of in the middle ground there.
And her camera height is higher as well to match that.
Yeah. The other thing to note in the 2 different stances is in the flying stance she is ranged at magic attacks, but in the ground stance she's actually doing melee attacks.
All right. Well, we've got the stance switch down. Let's talk about the passive. Death Gets Life.
So Tiamat's passive does a different thing in each of the stances, right? That's kind of the gimmick here. So in the flying stance, Tiamat gains health from nearby ally and enemy deaths. So that's any deaths around her, but a little bit less from minions. In her ground stance, she gains up to 5 hardened scales, and that's kind of the mechanism that allows her to be tanky in that stance. So gaining a hardened scale is actually damage mitigation that breaks after a certain amount of damage is taken. It also counts for nearby ally and enemy death, but not including minions this time. So mostly gods and like jungle monsters, large jungle monsters.
What does it mean? Do you have to
All
restack
right,
this?
So let's talk about the flying stance abilities here. And we'll start off with Primordial Onslaught, her ability 1 in flying stance. What's going on with this one, Clumsy?
Yeah, Primordial Onslaught, Pod, if you don't mind me being an annoying one, can you set level just so you have the ranks 1 and 2, and then we'll go on from there. Because Primordial Onslaught, well, Tiamat gains power, allowing her to fire orbs of energy at the end of the channel. Each orb stops on gods, but damages minions and enemies on the way through, going through walls. And as you can see, as she charges up, she gains from 1 to 2 projectiles. At ranks 3 and 5, that actually increases. So at rank 3, she goes from 1, 2 to 4 projectiles. And then finally at rank 5, she'll gain all of 6 projectiles if you continue through the entire channel.
Wow, feels like you'd have to max that.
And you can see her like beautiful cuneiform glyphs like around her back kind of filling in as she channels. I think we did a lot of work actually to get that feeling right.
Yes, this one looks great.
Oh,
I'm gonna ask Pawn to
it looks
kind
nice,
of,
and it's a good
charge
indicator.
up and kind of do a sweep as you fire, so we can see how the projectiles kind of interact with this one because it's kind of unique.
Oh yeah, you can definitely change your mind mid-fire and switch targets.
Yeah, if you hit the same god with multiple ones, you are going to be doing less damage per successful shot.
But not by much. Looking at the numbers.
This is still her primary ranged poke. This is going to do a lot of damage. If you walk into this and take all 6 shots in the late game, you're going to feel it, right? It's going to feel like a Scylla Crush.
Oh yeah.
And one thing that's important as well is that because the amount of projectiles increases as you rank up that ability, her early game, even though she's a stance switcher, isn't actually the strongest. But we can get into that a little bit later as we talk about her hit. Then now we can get to the second ability.
All right, yeah, let's talk about Ruination.
So Ruination, Tiamat creates an energy field. That's going to be what we call a double-rounded triangle, where it deals low damage to enemies in the entire area, and then a larger amount in the inner area after another time to deploy. The inner area will then also stun enemies that are inside of it. So low damage, and then high damage and a stun for enemies inside the center.
Oh, it's quick though. Be interesting how hard that is to confirm. Against a moving
I
target.
love the effects on this one, and of course, I called it out a little bit, but new shape, I'm sure people are hype about that.
Always. And both of these abilities are really exploring the sort of like primordial creation magic that Tiamat wields. It's not just like something that would burn you or destroy you. It's like, imagine that Tiamat just undoes things that she wants to destroy, right? It's really cool.
Control
type of
Z.
unique take. Yeah, right.
All right, so we're talking about kind of her undoing things, but let's talk about her creating things. It's time to talk about the ultimate.
That was fantastic.
Children of
done
creation.
there,
I appreciate it. I've been practicing, you know.
People were wondering how is Tiamat going to be summoning all these different creatures, and how does she have
Oh
all
my
these
God.
abilities? Well, that's in the fourth. Her ultimate.
another
flying
stance.
If you can see right here, she's actually going to be toggling in to another stance, really, another posture, where she can now use 3 completely different abilities in this stance. They
What's
all
it with the
will share a
mages and
cooldown.
3
The
stances?
first one here is Summon Serpents, where Tiamat will place a Pit of Creation, which spawns Serpents of Tiamat that travel down the minion lanes, just like minions, just like lane minions. They attack nearby enemies. If you do them in the jungle, they'll try and attack things nearby before finding
That's so cute.
a nearby lane. 2 serpents spawn every 10 seconds, and the deployable in general will create 3 waves before disappearing. Also, any enemies that are hit by the serpents will have their damage done reduced. These guys are really a new mechanism that we haven't really tried before, which is passive lane pushers.
Yes.
A little bit of other health as well is that they take 1 HP from god hits, including abilities, per unique ability, as well as 3 hits from minions. So they are a little bit tankier to minions, and like I said, they apply that damage reduction debuff as well.
I know,
So
I'm
God's
so
in.
tired of it's just the way they
You can
walk.
do some really interesting lane pushing and XP farming tricks with this ability too. And it's a very unique ultimate in that you can choose which one you want. So if it wasn't clear, this is used by pressing 2 different buttons to activate the ultimate and then pressing another one to choose the creature. Similar as kind of the way you would do Merlin's stance switch choice.
Yep. Enemies also can actually stand on that Pit of Creation deployable, the circle where they spawn from, to actually destroy it early as well. That's if they can find it, if they can get to it. But in general, these minions will, if you actually see, they don't have a lifetime. They will keep traveling until they're killed eventually by towers or the Titan.
I was going to bring that up. I was going to say, so these serpents are persistent. They will push until they die.
Yep.
Yeah.
And yeah, that circle will only last 3 waves of these minions, and you can only have 1 of the pits out at a time. But from there, I think we can go into the second of Tiamat's flying ultimate abilities, Summon Beast, where Tiamat creates a different one of her children, Kusariku, one of the ones in the stories, who stands guard at a target location. A little bit different to the primary purpose, Kusariku or Summon Beast, if an enemy god gets too close, he will charge them and slow them and then attack them. He will wait guard to protect Tiamat and protect locations. So you can see he's just waiting there, but if there's a god nearby, he will immediately start attacking them and slowing them extremely heavily for 80%, but only for 1 second.
All of these children we're spawning here from Tiamat are also based specifically on ancient Babylonian texts, and they have their ancient Babylonian names, which Clumsy is doing a pretty good job of pronouncing.
Yeah, I know.
I hope I'm doing okay there.
Yeah.
So yeah, he serves a completely different purpose, and we can get to him in a little bit more detail, and with his purpose. But I think we can go on to the third one of Tiamat's children, which is a little bit less of the normal kind of monster challenges you'd see, but it is Umudabrutu, the Violent Storm. And Umudabrutu, or Summoning Storm, when Tiamat creates this deployable, it actually follows enemies before knocking them upwards and dissipating. So, Umudabrutu, the Violent Storm, is
just an
actually
ability.
still one of Tiamat's children.
That's just an extra ability. That's not even a pet.
If you guys caught on social media, the you know we love our distracted boyfriend meme here at Hi-Rez, and this is one that we were thinking about here. So it's kind of like Cuckoo Tornado, but not really. But it follows around. But
follows
again,
around
the
like
only
The 3 other spoiler tweets were actually the references to her 3 children that she can spawn.
Yep.
So if those ones that
this
were in
is
the
like
kind of more ancient
Yeah.
runic style, those were meant to hint to these, which was a really cool concept.
Yep, exactly. And then, like I mentioned a few times earlier, and I can get to again later, each one of Tiamat's ultimate children really provide a different purpose to her gameplay. Remember I said they all share a cooldown, so you can only use 1 at a time. So if you want to use those basilisks to spawn and push down the lane, that's fine, but that means you won't have your Minotaur, your Bulwark there, who might help root down a single target if you're being ganked, which also means you might not have Umudabrutu there for when team fights break out, and you might want that AoE
Oh
destroy.
wow, that's a long cooldown for the small lizard at least.
Well, that wraps it up.
Serpents.
We've gone through everything in flying stance, so
Yeah,
let's
one more stance to
transition
go.
and let's transition and switch things up and talk about grounded stance. And the first ability, probably the biggest talking point on social media after the closer look, is Consume. Let's talk about Consume, Clumsy. What's going on with this one?
So I love introducing this one to people because I just go, it's a simple cone, right? You consume, you just look at it, it's a simple cone, it deals damage and it slows enemies. But wait, there's more. We really wanted to try something different here. Consume in the grounded stance, Tiamat can actually use this in minions, on large monsters and buff holders, as we're about to see, to execute them underneath the health thresholds. So you can see
so
the
that's how
little
she jungles.
FX mark we have on those enemies. It'll instantly kill those enemies. Now, as you might have seen with this kind of mechanic before, if Tiamat actually does this to a buff holder, well, things get a little bit interesting. And I think I love seeing all the different ideas that people had when we said she duplicates buffs, but there's actually a little bit more to it as well. So Tiamat is able to consume and immediately gain one of these buffs, as we're about to see. Bang. She dropped a red buff in the world, and she gained a red buff as well. But there's a little bit more to it too. If Tiamat kills another jungle buff holder without using, well, not necessarily without using consume, if she already has consume a consumed buff, so go ahead and kill that, she can then actually walk over and pick up a second buff. So not only does she
I wish I could see
duplicate
chat
buffs-
right now.
Yeah, I know. It's
Wait, what?
You're gonna be like, wait a second. What? So she actually is able, she's the first god who will be able to utilize 2 different buffs. They all have the maximum duration, and I know people are going to be thinking, this is just insane, but there's a lot of different things we did to make sure that this feels balanced. In fact, we actually started out with the consumed buff having like 20% of the duration, or 30 or 50%, but we noticed that trying to force this kind of gameplay, and even if you're playing her in the jungle, it's not the easiest to make
You
use
still
of.
on solo
Now, with other
then?
game modes like Arena or Joust, it might actually be a lot easier. But in Conquest, if you're playing in the mid lane or the solo lane, it may not actually be that easy to get this going. But like people said, if you want to drop a red buff,
Start on
pick that
solo
up
and
for
then
yourself
get your
and let the
speed
support
after.
go ahead and grab that. Well, you're feeling pretty happy.
it's generally just difficult. You can't be everywhere at once, and you don't want to disrupt all of your lanes' starting positions and their normal jungle flow just
True.
so you can get an extra jungle buff, especially not necessarily in the early game. But I'm very excited to see
I
how
think
the
you can
pros
just do
use
blue.
this and when they do coordinate.
Mess Soul up a little
they
bit.
do try a completely different start when it's a Tiamat in the game, because then we'll really see the pinnacle of this power.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely anticipating if a Tiamat is on your team, you're definitely wanting to prioritize the Greater Scorpion to get those enhanced jungle buffs.
Yep, Pawn's got a good point here. Another thing that you can see is that, just like in the stories, Tiamat can actually consume her actual pets. So they will immediately be executable by consume. You can see those little points. And what that does, if you remember from the passive, is that she can actually gain hardened scales, which is what allows her to have the extra mitigations when her pets die around her.
Oh.
So if she summons minions in the flying stance, her pets, and then goes into the ground stance and immediately consumes them, she will be even tankier. She gets 5 stacks of hardened scales. I know, it sounds like a lot, guys, but believe me, it'll all come together.
So much. All right. Well, that was consumed. Let's talk about Outburst. Going to be the second ability in Grounded Stance.
Outburst, a lot more simple. Tiamat slams the ground, creating seismic rifts that erupt in succession in front of her, damaging and knocking up enemies.
Easy
That's
enough.
all it does, I promise.
That's it. Yeah. I was waiting. I was like, wait, is there more?
Rolling damage and CC.
Yeah.
All
We've
right,
already
and
talked
then-
about the third ability, which allows her to switch stances, but then she's finally got her ultimate in ground stances.
Yes. Tempest of Undoing, her ultimate in Grounded Stance. What does this one do?
So Tempest of Undoing, it causes an outburst around her, dealing damage in that circle around her that you see, and also a small dot effect to any enemies that are hit by this, gods and minions. Now, the other thing to note, just one small other caveat, is that when Tiamat uses and hits enemy gods, she also gains 1 hardened scale per enemy god hit. This ability is her main way of generating hardened scales outside of just stance switching. So we assume that you're not going to be using her pets and consuming them or people dying nearby. So you use this right after you've dived in on as many gods as you can to gain stacks of mitigation.
And melee form hinges so heavily
That
on the
was a lot.
passive,
Tiamat is super interesting, and
which is hard
lots
to
of stuff
use.
that we just haven't done before.
Depends
with
on
lots of unique gameplay ideas and
kills.
mechanics. How do you guys kind of envision playstyle recommendations, and where do you see her kind of fitting in the meta and in Conquest?
So, I mean, she's definitely most likely going to be a mage that you see in the middle lane, but I think she can definitely flex in between the solo lane with a tankier playstyle, or maybe even in the jungle if people really want to try and get maximum utilization out of Consume. As I mentioned earlier, she doesn't actually have the strongest early game because she only has a small bit of clear with those 2 shots of her Primordial Onslaught. So, unlike most stands, which is like Merlin or even R2, for example, her early game is going to be harder to get make use by. Conduit Gem has helped a lot in the new season, but still, even with that, it's a bit rough.
Yeah, that's a great point. She is different from other stance switchers in the fact that if you want stance switch at level 1, you have to invest in your 3, which may not be the best ability for you to take. So definitely interesting.
Right.
That's a great point, Clumsy.
The other thing to note is I know you guys have seen this, a lot going on. We wanted to make sure that Tiamat really did justice to all of these different themes. I think it's going to make a lot more sense when you get your hands on her. And another thing to note is that while it seems like she has a lot that she can do, it's all actually coming out over a longer period of time, right? Even if you're using the entirety of her kit, you're using Summon Beast to slow down an enemy into Ruination, into Primordial Onslaught, diving into enemies, and then using her entire combo there, that's still not maybe as much burst as just using your 3-1 ulti combo as Elo. It's coming over a longer period of time, and it forces you to jump into the fight.
Definitely. Well, thanks so much for going through everything, Clumsy.
I really don't
You
know.
put in a ton of work on Tiamat here.
How she'll be
and I'm super
strength-wise.
excited for players to get their hands on the goddess of the Salt Sea. But before we break, we do have, some recolors and mastery skins that we want to show off. The first one, your standard recolor, is Azure Sea Tiamat. And we tweeted this art, and everybody immediately was like, who did this? This is absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
I know
this one's
AJ,
sick.
yeah.
This was my favorite of all of her cards. I mean, they're all really cool, but
Just
personally,
so
this one
beautiful.
speaks to me.
Yeah.
It's just something about her rising from the depths, and you see the wreckage and stuff around. And
I really wonder.
I love that we kept kind of the pinks,
She
but
seems really
instead of like the cyans, we go into like a deep
hard to learn.
here. This one's great. And we've got some.
And the
we've
skills
got some
don't
voice
do
lines
that
we're
much
gonna show off as
individually.
well. So let's listen to the first voice line we have for.
So I really
Tiamat
wonder how
while we
strong
look
she's
at this
gonna be.
recolor.
Oh.
Is flawed and full of corruption. I have arrived to cleanse the land and reshape it in my own image.
Interesting accent.
Oh, I love this. And then I got to give a shout out while we're listening to the voice pack to the audio team, specifically Chad. I know he took in a lot of work kind of thinking about the weight on both of all the audio effects as we transition stances and stuff like that for Tiamat. It's super awesome. But we've got the next recolor as a part of your Season Pass 2021, your first Ascended skin of the year. It's going to be Tiamat, and I love kind of like the greenish yellows here. What do you think?
I mean, we had the different purples, and we've got these awesome greens. I love this kind of hue on this like crazy monstrous creature.
This is a very
Oh,
unique
wow, this
color,
actually works.
choice, and I really like it. And I think it really appeals to the people who are looking for the more reptilian feel from her,
That's a good point.
which is what I think comes through with this, which is really cool.
All right, let's take a listen to another voice line for Tiamat.
I see insects competing for supremacy. Playing God. Let me show you where the God really is.
I feel like a trailer voice is different than.
All these voice lines just are super, super great. Let's transition into mastery skins for Tiamat. Will be available day one when she launches. So if you're grinding, getting those worshippers up, you will be able to unlock the gold, legendary, and diamond skins.
Damn.
Here's the card for the masteries.
Card
This one
art still
looks so great.
beautiful too.
I know. I love how she's just kind of grasping that energy and is just ready to onslaught someone and just like undo their entire existence.
Taking that time here.
We go in game here, see the turnaround. And I believe we have one more voice line for Tiamat. Let's take a listen as we transition to the legendary.
Not a
and
bad
diamond
one.
skins.
Not the greatest.
You dare test your might against Tiamat?
No, we don't want to test our might against Tiamat.
I know, right? Yeah, I definitely do not. So there we go. And I believe we'll be transitioning to the legendary and diamond skins here in just a bit. Yep, there we go. There's
That looks
legendary.
better. That
These
looks
colors
cool.
really
That looks very
popular.
dragonesque.
Awesome.
Yeah, they do.
I
I always love this theme, especially on the creature characters. This looks so badass.
Yeah, I always think about, where are we gonna, do the color blocking for the creatures? Because with humans, it's in the clothing, it's kind of easier to tell, but the kind of liberties the art team takes for the mastery skins on creatures is really great. And we're going
We
for
kind
the
of just went
diamond
all
skin.
out on the mastery colors for Tiamat here.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep, there's the
sweet.
diamond. There we go.
That's clean. Yeah, I want that.
Definitely
Who's gonna be getting
going
that
to
day
be-
one, day two?
Oh,
Week one? What is
that's
it?
so
It's
cool.
I love the new god race.
Oh my god, it looks like the
First to
Yu-Gi-Oh!
diamond. I
dragon.
love getting those tweets.
I need this and I don't even think I'm going to play how
Great.
much.
Well, that is a wrap for the goddess of the Salt Sea. Lots
That
going
is
on
so
with
cool.
Tiamat. I am super excited. I hope all the players are super excited. I know the entire team internally is super excited. First god of season 8. I believe
Pantheon.
PTS is new Pantheon. There's so much going on. It's awesome. New conquest map. But I believe PTS is targeted for Friday, so be sure to keep an eye out on
Good.
all the official Smite Game social media channels. We will be sure to let you know when you'll be able to log in on PTS and test out the newest mage coming to Smite. But that's a wrap here for us. Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in. We will catch you all on the next one.
Thank you.
Whoa. With that, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope to see you for the next one soon. If you're new to the channel, please sub button and ring the bell. Yeah, that's it. ZiSotto out.